In an emergency, who do you see arrive first on the scene? You would be in good company if you said the fire department. Firefighters are often the human Swiss Army knives of our communities and come to the rescue in any number of ways. Walter White has been a firefighter since 1987 and Sacramento's fire chief since 2014. After a long career, the chief is hanging up his boots and turning off his siren. He joins us for his exit interview next on Studio Sacramento.
At Five Star Bank, we create thoughtful solutions to help the Capital Region thrive, from economic development and education to public health and safety, issues that are vitally important to Sacramento's prosperity. We're proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
Chief, when I think about tragedies like the Thomas Fire or 9/11, where we lost firefighters in the line of duty, it makes me wonder, what type of individual willingly signs up to put themselves at such risk?
Well, you know, firefighters are a unique breed because, you know, I would say courage isn't really the absence of fear, but it's the belief that there's something more important. And, you know, that's part of the core value of the fire department is that, you know, there's certain risks that are worth taking, you know, and to assist or save someone else is a big part of the fire service culture.
Have you ever been afraid out on the job?
You know, I think everybody's been nervous from time to time, and you know, that's when you really got to rely on your training, because your training is what will carry you through the toughest situations you'll face.
It seems that the camaraderie between firefighters is something that is rare, because I hear all the time about, well, my brother or my sister. Where does that come from?
Well, it is second to none. I think, you know, the fire station becomes a home away from home, and your fire department becomes, you know, a second family. You know, we often say in the fire service, you know, you have four families: the one that you're born into, the one that you marry into, the one you form of your closest friends, and your fire department family. And I think, you know, a lot of because of how close-knit the working relationship is, and that you got to rely on each other during emergency and stressful situations, that bond runs pretty deep.
When you look back over your career, what are some of the best times that come to mind in terms of being with your firefighter family?
You know, I was very fortunate in my career. I got to work my way up through the ranks, but I got to spend 14 years as a company officer. And that's really where the rubber hits the road. You get to kind of set the tone for the crew, but you still roll out the door as part of a team and deliver service. So I'd have to say, you know, my time as a fire captain is some of the more rewarding and memorable parts of my career.
And when you think about the other side of it, because as a firefighter, you deal with the whole range of human experience. What stands out as one of the toughest encounters you had when you were out on the street?
Well, I don't know if I can name a specific one, but I think what you touched on is, you know, we get exposed to a lot of human suffering. You know, you get to meet people a lot of times at their lowest moment, when they're vulnerable and they're desperate and they're seeking help, and they call 911. And, you know, it's really what's required of the men and women of the Sacramento Fire Department is that we show up and we are not only that capable and competent, but that compassionate person who's going to assist them and see them through that emergency.
I'm curious, what inspired you in the first place to become a firefighter as opposed to, say, a policeman or anything else?
Well, you know, for me, growing up, a lot of my youth sports coaches were San Francisco firefighters. I grew up in a town, Novato, which was kind of a commutable distance. And I grew up not only with them coaching me, but alongside their kids. And I naturally just developed an interest. Coaches have a big influence on your life, and that's kind of what got me started. But recently, one of the things I'm proud about is that, I established an advisory committee on equity and diversity in order to help diversify our department. I know how I got interested, and I know how to attract more people like me, but I really reached out to a cross section of our membership and asked them, how did you get interested? Because that's what I want to know. And I just gave them really 3 basic charges. One was to advise me on best practices of non-discriminatory hiring. The other was to make me aware of outreach opportunities to recruit and attract from within our community. And then 3 was to be those outreach liaisons that kind of help build our fire department to be reflective of the community that we're serving.
What made that initiative important enough for you to take it on? I mean, you got a million things that you could focus on.
Sure.
Why that?
The city did an audit on workforce diversity, and our numbers weren't great. And I like to say it's kind of a 3-fold answer when people ask me how we're doing. It's where we were wasn't great. How we've responded to it is, I think, has actually been pretty remarkable. We're actually having a girls' camp, a women empowerment camp, where we'll be exposing young women to a week long of activity and the fire service as a potential career.
How old?
It's the going from, I believe it's 13 to 19 range that we're going to be reaching out to.
Going back to kids and the influence that coaches and others have, whenever you go to a Parents' Day and your kid has you come in to present on what you do for a living, you never want to be on the same day as the guy who's a fireman or the woman who's a firefighter as well. What is it about firefighters that's such a fascination for kids?
I think, some of it's the unpredictability of the job. I mean, we provide 5 essential public services, between fire suppression, emergency medical, hazardous materials mitigation, technical rescue, and also community risk reduction. But I think part of it is we're on the emergency response side of things, and that, we face challenges that a lot of people typically don't encounter.
And when you're looking at the challenges that firefighters today face, has the profession evolved since you first got started in '87?
I would say you go back to 1850 when the Sacramento Fire Department was formed, that our mission, our core mission hasn't changed. It's to save lives, protect property and the environment. But how we deliver that mission has had to evolve. I mean, and we are now using technology and new training and techniques probably more than ever before.
And in going out and servicing the community, what is it that people are generally unaware of about this fire district and the geography that you administer over, that most people say, well, I didn't realize that?
Well, I think that I think most people have some awareness, but a majority of our responses nowadays are for medical emergencies, and that the level of training that our firefighters have had to develop in order to meet the needs of the community has improved, has evolved considerably since I entered into the fire service.
And this is an urban district, but part of the work that you do is you do have some areas that are more rural in nature. What's it like on the American River Parkway? I mean, we hear a lot about homelessness and that there are fires out there. Do you spend much of your time in the less populated areas?
Sure. So, the city of Sacramento is urban primarily, but it's urban, rural, and suburban. And, we are also part of one of the best master mutual aid systems in the nation here in California. So our crews can be deployed to major wildland fires anywhere in the state. But along the American River Parkway, it is one of our challenges. And when I first came on as fire chief, it was my second day on the job. We had a 100+ acre grass fire along the American River Parkway. It caused us to evacuate the water park, cancel a sold-out professional soccer game, and delay the largest pyrotechnic display in the region. So going into the next season, we really tried to be more proactive, and we conducted our annual wildland preparedness training along the Parkway, which allowed us, we had to work with multiple stakeholders and Parkway preservation interests to conduct some live fire training down there. And what it did, those exercises allowed us to kind of manage that hazard fuel by creating some fire breaks. And the following year, even though we still had a number of incidents, we had up to 60 fires along the Parkway.
What's a fire break?
Well, a fuel break is what it really is you know, if you've got a continuous flow of dry, light, flashy fuel, and you've got any, you know, high heat and any kind of wind that day, fire's going to spread rapidly. But if there's a portion of break in that fuel, that allows for our crews to get down there and hopefully contain that fire and keep it smaller. And the second year when we did that, even though we had a number of fires, none of them exceeded about 3 acres because we were able to effectively use those breaks and contain the fires quicker.
You talk about the fire breaks and the fuel. I'm curious, do you have any perspective on the effect that all these years of drought and the consequence of global warming has had on the severity and frequency of fires in California in general?
Yeah, there's 3 things that really drive wildland fires, and they're, you know, fuel, weather, and topography. And the fuel moisture is critically low. And, you know, the light flashy fuel dries out quickly within hours, but a lot of the larger standing fuel, you know, has also died, you know, as a result of bark beetles or drought, and it's created a lot of standing, very receptive fuel, which means that, you know,
receptive fuel.
Yeah, receptive, so that it will easily ignite. You know, if you when there's a windy day, the wind will actually rain embers and blow embers well ahead of the head of the fire. And if the fuel ahead of there is receptive, it'll spot and ignite and just accelerate the spread of the fire.
I'm curious, is that one of the reasons that fires like the fire in Sonoma or the Thomas Fire were so difficult to put out?
Absolutely. You know, and wind was a huge factor in those fires. And, you know, an 8-mile-an-hour wind can send embers a quarter mile ahead of the flame front. And, you know, if those embers, when they're landing, are igniting, yeah, you're greatly contributing to the spread of that fire.
Well, coming back to more of the urban setting, as you go throughout the community, you and your firefighters, are there particular things that we as residents do that drive you all crazy in terms of making it more likely that we're going to start a fire?
Well, you know, and we have a very effective fire prevention division, and our public information officer also does a lot to try and provide community education. And you know, some of my concerns are about our vehicles on the road and drivers being mindful and aware of their response and doing the right thing and pulling to the right and stop. But I think one of the areas of big concern and something that we really attacked this year wasn't fire related, but it was water safety. And,
water safety?
Mm-hmm. You know, we were, over the years between the major holidays of summer, Memorial Day and Labor Day, you know, it wasn't uncommon for us to have 8, 10, 12 drownings along the American River. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and you know, actually, I believe it was in 2016, working with multiple stakeholders, including Sac Republic FC, who, helped provide probably one of the most effective community awareness campaigns. They did the Life Looks Good on You, and they had soccer players wearing the life vests and really helped.
At the games?
Well, no,
Or the community, or?
in billboards and ads, and one of the things we've always had the Kids Don't Float program and the Life Vest Loan Out program, but really, the people that were drowning were teenagers, young adults, mostly male. A lot, probably half had been drinking at the time, and alcohol and water don't mix. And if you're out there for any length of time and you're not wearing a life vest, typically it's a question of, it's not really a question of if, but a matter of when you're going to find yourself in trouble. So we really tried to drive home that message. And I believe it's 2016, we actually had zero swimming drownings along the American River Parkway, which was, really exceptional. And, the DART team participated. We've had crews out there. The Sacramento County Board of Supervisors really took an interest in this, and, our city council members. So that was multiple stakeholders all contributed to that very successful public awareness campaign.
And you mentioned a little bit earlier that the majority of your calls are medical-related calls today. That's surprising. Has that evolved over time, or is that just something that we citizens don't usually catch?
It has. We went on over 91,000 responses for service last year. But the public's expectation of our emergency medical response has increased, and that's one of the big reasons our training has increased, because those expectations are there.
And from the standpoint of who we call first, when we call 911, many of us don't understand what really happens in that call. So that doesn't necessarily just go directly to the police department. It dispatches to the fire department if that's the more appropriate route?
Well, there's these different dispatch centers, and we're part of a regional dispatch center, and Sacramento PD has their own dispatch center. But, it really depends right now on how you call. If you call from what we call a landline, a house phone, it'll direct you to the closest dispatch center, and they will dispatch units from there. But if you're using a cell phone, today that call initially goes to the CHP, and then they route it to the nearest dispatch center.
If we are on our cell phones, because so many of us are, much more than landlines, is there something else that we should be doing to get in contact with you guys?
Really calling 911 for an emergency is the right thing to do. The process of transferring a call is just usually pretty quick. Our goals are to, be at just virtually any emergency from the time we're notified within 3 to 7 minutes, 11 minutes max to have the transporting ambulance there. But, that's perhaps the best thing you can do is just call 911 and give an accurate description of what your emergency is. And if you can do it from a house phone rather than a cell phone, you skip a step of rerouting.
I'm curious, in order to respond to that wide range of emergencies that you and your team does, you must have to stay in shape constantly. I mean, or does it all come from just on-the-job exercise that comes with doing the job?
No, and I'm glad you bring that up. And, also you'd mentioned that Swiss Army knife, and that's, I think what the public expects is somebody who's, can provide all these services, and firefighting itself is a very physically arduous job. And really, if you want to get a glimpse at the level of that, in October of this year, we'll be bringing in a world challenge event called the Scott Firefighter Combat Challenge. And what this event is it's the only really grant-funded university-based studies that turned into an international competition.
What do you mean?
Well, they set out to identify the requisite physical performance requirements to become a firefighter. And what it resulted in was a course of 5 common yet critical fireground tasks. And competitors now will line up against each other and race against each other and the clock through this course to see who's the fastest firefighter. And in October of this year, Sacramento, we're going to be hosting the World Challenge right in front of the state capitol.
Really?
Yes. And we'll have somewhere between 500 to 600 firefighters will be coming into the city, and from 15, 16 different countries. And they will compete in a week long of activity, and the final 2 days will be covered on ESPN.
Wow. Well, incidentally, what are the 5 areas?
You start by, you're wearing full gear, so you're not only dealing with the constant load of the gear, but the metabolic heat stress of having your own body heat trapped against you and you're breathing compressed air. So just like simulating, just like you would in a fire. And you have to pick up a hose bundle, race up a 5-story tower, grab a rope, hoist another roll to the top of that tower, descend the tower, hop onto a force machine similar to chopping into a roof, and drive a steel I-beam a distance of 5 feet using a shot mallet. Then race through a series of cones to a charged hose line. Advance that hose line through a doorway, hit a target, and then straight over to a 175-pound dummy or a simulated victim. Lift that dummy, and hoist that dummy and drag it backwards 100 feet to the finish line.
Wow. You know, in the 70s, ABC used to have this competition called Superstars. Mm-hmm. It sounds like that. Mm-hmm. Or one of the extreme ninja challenges that is on one of the networks right now. So when do you start preparing to train for this?
Well, you know, smart competitors are training year round. Mm-hmm. I do take a lot of pride in I've never led the world in time, but I think I have in perseverance, being the only competitor to compete in all 27 seasons of the challenge.
For 27 seasons, you've been in the challenge?
Yes.
Wow. All right. Well, so tell us, what's next for you? You're stepping down. What are you going to do with yourself?
You know, I'm looking at taking a little break and, see what opportunities come up. But one of the things I'm looking to stay active with is our urban search and rescue team. That gets called out to major emergencies. So that's...
I'm not aware of what that is. What does that do?
Well, our urban search and rescue team, Sacramento Fire is a sponsoring agency for California Task Force 7. There's 28 federally funded urban search and rescue teams in the nation. And these are the teams that will be called upon, and they were recently called upon for back-to-back-to-back hurricanes that actually affected 1% of the nation's population this last year. They went to the mudslides in Ventura. It's multidisciplined, but we have canine search teams as well as rescue specialists, as well as there's physicians that are members of the team, and it's to provide that high-level response to national emergencies.
And much like these teams, I'm curious. One thing that we constantly hear about is that firefighters from Wisconsin are out in Southern California, or firefighters from Sacramento might be down in New Orleans or something like that. How does that take place, and your department still provides service?
Yeah, we were very fortunate. One of the things I was glad to be able to do during my time was close the staffing deficit by hiring over 100 new firefighters. So that enabled us to participate in the federal system and send firefighters out of county, out of state on these emergencies, and still have sufficient staff to backfill at home. And it's really because we have a lot of dedicated professionals who are willing to work those extra hours to backfill, to provide that level of safety coverage at home as well. Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to ask you, what do you do for fun to unwind, given all the responsibility that you've had to hold?
One of the things I've enjoyed doing also through the years is playing hardball, playing baseball in the Sacramento Men's Senior Baseball League, as well as this is the first year I'm actually going to be playing in the NABA, the National Adult Baseball Association.
What position?
I play outfield, but you know what I noticed when I see video nowadays, in my mind I still think I look like Yasiel Puig diving into third, but I realize on video I pretty much look like an old guy falling down these days, so, but still enjoy it.
What's the stat of yours that you're most proud of on baseball?
You know, one year I actually led the league in steals, and you know, I think it's being an RBI, because that means your team, you've scored, and that's, you know, you got to score points for your team to win. But you know, I put on the uniform, I feel like I'm 12 years old again, but most times after the game I feel about 80. So.
Well, thanks for winning for Sacramento. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
All right. And that's our show. Thanks to our guests, and thanks to you for watching Studio Sacramento. I'm Scott Syphax. See you next time right here on KVIE.
At Five Star Bank, we create thoughtful solutions to help the Capital Region thrive, from economic development and education to public health and safety, issues that are vitally important to Sacramento's prosperity. We're proud to be part of the conversation and hope you'll join in.
All episodes of Studio Sacramento, along with other KVIE programs, are available to watch online at KVIE.